Okay, we are streaming. So, welcome everyone. My name is KK DeRosset. I am with the Central Arkansas Library System and Be Mighty Little Rock. Tonight, we're going to be talking about food waste with Sylvia Blain, the Executive Director of Potluck Food Rescue Arkansas. So, just to get started, tonight's talk is part of a series of talks we're doing as part of Earth Month and Cows Goes Green. So we'll be here every Wednesday at 6 o'clock on Zoom and Facebook Live. And we hope that you can join us for the coming weeks as we have additional programs. So, Be Mighty Little Rock is an anti hunger campaign that connects kids and teens to free after school weekend and summer meal programs. And if you go to BeMightyLittleRock.org, you'll find a full list of the active meal sites and meal times. So if you know anyone that could use a free after school or weekend meal, please tell them about Be Mighty Little Rock. So introducing our speaker today, Sylvia Blain. Sylvia is the Executive Director of Potluck Food Rescue. She has more than 20-year career in operations, program management, and consulting in the nonprofit sector, and more than a decade of nonprofit leadership experience. Sylvia's personal and professional focus is working to ensure a healthy and accessible food system for everyone. Ms. Blain is a graduate of UA Little Rock, where she studied food systems through sociology and anthropology. 7 years as an event planner for the city of Little Rock. She's worked with promoters to host the Great Arkansas Beer Festival, the World Cheese Dip Championships, Indian Food Festival, and many other food-focused celebrations. She's an active member of Arkansas Fundraising Professionals and the Arkansas Hospitality Association. Sylvia grew up in Fort Worth, Texas, but has lived in Arkansas for long enough to call it home. She lives in North Little Rock with her longtime partner, Shannon Sanders, an architect with Taggart Architects. She has two grown sons, Nick and Ben. So, Sylvia, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Thank you. Thank you for the introduction. As KK told you, I'm with Potluck Food Rescue. I have been with the organization for about 3 years. In addition to what you heard in my bio, I also have a long history of working with sustainability and food systems here in Central Arkansas. So, that set me up perfectly to work with hunger relief and food waste. Potluck Food Rescue is a 30-year-old organization. We're over 30 actually now, 31-year-old organization that is on the banks of the Arkansas River in North Little Rock at the base of the Broadway Bridge. We recover excess food from grocery stores, events, commercial kitchens, and we redistribute it to hunger relief agencies in Central Arkansas. Over the course of the last year, which of course included our pandemic, we distributed more than 400,000 pounds of food and diverted that from the landfill. So to move into why that's important, food waste in the United States makes up 40% of the food that is produced in the United States is wasted. The majority of that is sent either to the landfill or to animal feed processing places. That is 81.4 billion pounds of food with an estimated value of $161 billion. That breaks down to about $1,500 per family per year in food wasted. When you contrast that with hunger statistics in the United States, we have 54 million people that are food insecure in the United States. More than 560,000 of those are here in Arkansas, and that's 1 in 6 people. We have 1 in 4 children in the state of Arkansas that is food insecure. So you can see a direct correlation between wasted food and hunger in the United States. So this is why agencies like Potluck Food Rescue are so important. I do want to show you something, but I think it's important to define food waste before moving on. So I'm going to share my screen with you and show you a video that I think does a pretty good job of that.
Organic waste is the umbrella for all materials that are able to biologically decompose. And food waste is a category under that umbrella. It's one of the ones that people talk more about these days. The concept of food waste has evolved over the last 100 years. There wasn't as much packaging 100 years ago, for example, probably after World War II, with more introduction of packaging. Instead of having to be consumed right away, you could keep it a little longer because of people's schedules today. They bought it thinking they'd cook, they went out, etc. So there's that sort of scenario of just how we have evolved in our access to food, how it's packaged.
Food waste is not even waste at all. We like to refer to it as food scraps because they have energy or they have nutrient value to them. They can either be used to create biogas to use for renewable energy, and or they can be used to create compost to be returned to the earth. The flip side of that, landfilling, incinerating, is sort of ending the food cycle. It's stopping it and it's providing no real benefit. It's actually negatively impacting through more methane emissions from landfills or gunking up the system at an incinerator, producing CO2 emissions from there. So returning it to the earth, doing something positive with it has so many sort of compounding benefits. Yeah, it's just kind of a no-brainer for us at this stage.
At the top of the list, you want to feed people. So if you can capture the food that's being wasted, if it's still edible, it can be donated to people in need. Feeding animals. So we have a lot of farmers around here. So it's one way for farmers to save money on their feed and also get that material out of the waste stream. Backyard composting, small scale composting, regional composting is like the next tier of that. And then like larger scale, anaerobic digestion, so capturing food waste and creating energy with it. The last would be landfill and incineration. So we're trying to not get to that point and use all of the methods and educate people about the methods and the hierarchy of capturing food waste.
Most common question I get asked about food waste is, what do we do with it? So when someone comes to our farm and finds out that we're taking food waste, their first thought is, oh, you're feeding it to your cows. And we don't feed any of our animals food waste for various reasons. But when I explain to them that we end up turning it into renewable energy and then use it as a fertilizer, their eyes are like, oh, wow, I didn't even know you could do that.
It's just amazing that nature doesn't really come up with any kind of waste. Nature uses all of its processes to create resources and food for other aspects of nature. There's no, like when you eat an orange and you take off the peel, that peel doesn't like get wasted like a candy wrapper would get wasted. That peel is now food for something else. And in most cases, it turns into soil so that it can grow more oranges. So it's just beautiful the way that there's a circular nature to the environment. And I think that the more that business practices and the more that society itself sort of mimics that, the better off we'll be in terms of living healthy lives on this planet.
Where we've ended up, especially these days, as everything can be delivered, so there's no relationship to the grower, the butcher, you don't have to leave your couch, and everything has to come packaged then just about. I'm not sure where that's going to end up in terms of food waste. I just know that it removes so many of the connections to food that it's a big question. What's next?
I feel like probably most of you realize what the definition of food waste is, but the environmental...
South Auckland company EcoStock
I'm so
Supplies
sorry.
is a small business making a big impact on consumer waste. A large part of the
I muted you, but once it's over, just feel free to unmute yourself.
Yeah, it's back. It wanted to move on to the next Zoom video. I will say, if you, I don't know if you saw that was produced by Rubicon, but Rubicon, if you go to their YouTube site and subscribe, They have a lot of phenomenal videos on organic waste and food waste. It's a pretty great organization. So sorry for that interruption. But I wanted to talk a little bit about the causes of food waste, because without understanding first what causes the food waste, we can't address the problem. And so there's typically kind of three areas where food waste originates, and one is at production. And the EPA just last month came out with new statistics. Let me see. In the production and supply chain, 20% of fruit and vegetables are lost during production. 12% is lost at the distribution and retail level, which is where we come in. And then another 28% is lost at the consumer level. And that's also where Potluck comes in. We pick up prepared foods as well as grocery items. But we also have unrealistic aesthetics standards for fruits and vegetables. And even those of us that think that maybe we don't, will sometimes opt for something that looks like it might not be bruised, or it doesn't have spots on it. We want to take the freshest thing so it'll last the longest. But by leaving those behind at the store, we're part of the problem. So unrealistic aesthetic standards, expecting perfection from our food is another big problem. It has opened up new markets. I think you've probably heard of things like the Misfits Market, or I think there's Imperfect Foods now. Those are coming along, and I'm sure there's even more at this point. And I guess I'm glad to see them. I do have some concerns about those, but we can talk about those if you want to ask me questions about those later. But another is at the consumer level. We often over purchase or over orders. And so it's portion control. You go to a restaurant and you get really, really large portions. You don't eat it all. It goes into the trash. You send it back if you don't take it home. Or we buy more than we can prepare in a week. And it happens to all of us. It goes into the crisper, and that's where it goes to die. So those are the three main causes of food waste. And they have relatively simple, at least at the consumer level, relatively simple solutions. The effects of food waste. So as food waste breaks down, a lot of people think if your food is going into the landfill, obviously it's kind of composting in place, but that's not true. Food in the landfill is inside of bags, so it does not get air or water, and it does not break down anaerobically like it would in a compost pile. So I remember reading one instance in a study where they were looking for food waste in landfills, and they found some lettuce that was more than 20 years old because it had been inside of a bag and not exposed to light, moisture, or air. So as food is breaking down in a landfill, it breaks down a lot more slowly and releases a lot of methane gas. The statistics on the methane are fairly alarming. I believe that landfills are responsible for 1/3 of the methane gas released worldwide into the atmosphere, and food waste is 8% of that. So by diverting food from the landfill, like we're doing here at Potluck, we're keeping that food from turning into methane gas at the landfill level. I received I get updates on regulations with bio waste, and I got one today talking about how more and more states are actually requiring landfills to turn away food waste and find some other use for it. So they want to get that out of their landfills and out of the atmosphere. I think I mentioned it was 8% of global gas. The other thing is that we're wasting the natural resources that go into food production. I mean, Arkansas is an agricultural state. It's our #1 industry in the state. And if you think about how much gasoline, water, manual labor goes into not to food production, but also food transportation, when you're wasting food, you're also wasting the natural resources that went into producing the food. And I think a lot of people don't think about that. They think of the food waste on the the consumer end, at the final thing. And part of that would be solved if we would start thinking of food recovery in the larger, we have a farm to table movement that we kind of have come to see as the whole circle, where, the seed to table movement, what happens after the table or at the table is just as important. And it's not the end, it's really just a part of that circle. And so we kind of need to close the gap on that. So we can talk about a little bit about what I don't want to get ahead of myself, but I think I'll show you how we do this. I'm going to share my screen again if you don't mind. There's no video this time, so I was going to show you a tool that we use. I'll show you where to find the tool first of all. The EPA has a waste reduction model tool. I'll show you the tool, but also it can be very complicated. There is a tutorial on here. It's very useful, and you have your inputs. You put in inputs of what you are. For us, I put in how many pounds of food that we have recovered, and it'll show us. It gives me here's the warm tool, and as you can see, you can put in all kinds of things: paper, branches, mixed metals, food waste. You do your inputs here. On how many pounds, you do it by pounds, mixed organics, you can put in meat, all kinds of other things. And then when you hit next, it will run a report for you. And I'm not going to show you, it takes quite a bit of time to run those reports. But this is what we get out of it. This is where we get these numbers for Potluck. So this is our annual report that was just released about a month ago. And this is the environmental impact of food rescue, specifically of Potluck food rescue operations in 2020. And this is based on the pounds, which I can show up here, the pounds of food that we rescued in 2020, which was just about 400,000 pounds of food. And so that equates to a decrease in greenhouse emissions by 323,000 cubic tons. Sorry, my glasses, I can't read this very well. Or removing annual emissions from 249,677 passenger vehicles, or conserving 373,008 household energy. It gives you an equivalent that will help you better understand what your impact is, and you can do it as an input or an output. So we use it to show what our benefit is, but you can also use that warm tool to show what your impact is. Stop sharing there. But that is that the EPA, it's called WARM, W-A-R-M, and it's a really handy tool. It's especially handy if you're a business owner and you want to see what your business impact is, particularly if you're seeking funding or grant funding for these kinds of initiatives, where you could show your actual impact. The EPA was really trying to offset all kinds of carbon emissions. So this is a really good way to prove to them what your impact, or what the impact of your program would be in offsetting those gases, or what your current impact is and what you'd like it to be. So it's a great tool. I think I showed you guys the hours. So what you can do, and this is kind of the important part, because food waste is a solvable problem, and it's fairly easy to solve. It just takes its will and knowing what the problem is. So on a personal level in your home, the fastest way to do that is to reduce what you're bringing home. So when you're at the grocery store, make a grocery list before you go. Don't overbuy. If you see an item that is slightly imperfect, but you know that it is still useful and you'll be preparing it soon, then go ahead and pick that up. If it's left behind in the store, it's likely to just get thrown away. If you have food that looks like it might go bad, if it can be frozen or prepared and then frozen before it goes bad, do that. Take containers with you to when you go to eat. so that you can take excess food home with you, and then you can freeze it or store it for it to eat later. Restaurants will definitely throw it away, particularly if it's already been served to you. It's getting restaurants to donate food waste is difficult, but they're unable to do it if it's already left the kitchen. So it's up to you to bring that home and not waste it. The other thing you could do, and this is really important for organizations like mine, and when I say organizations like mine, there's very few of us that strictly do food rescue. There's a lot of churches that pick up, food from time to time, but there's very few organizations that make it their goal to recover food and keep it from going to waste. Request, if you're going to the grocery store on a regular basis and you have a relationship, ask the guy in the produce section, hey, what do you guys do with this? If their answer is, we throw it out, then suggest to them that they call us, Potluck, or that they call, that they donate that food, or that they compost it. There is a hierarchy, an EPA hierarchy of food waste, and I won't share my screen with you again. But it's kind of an inverted triangle, and it should, at the top of the triangle is feeding people. Underneath that is feeding animals, and then composting, and then energy production, which I think was mentioned in the video, and then incineration and landfill, which you want to try to avoid at all costs. And at Potluck, we abide by the EPA's food waste hierarchy. So the vast majority of the food that comes into Potluck is donated to area hunger relief agencies. We have, at last count, 42 hunger relief agencies that we donate food to, feeding roughly 18,000 people a week. We are not directly feeding those people, so I never want to take credit for the work that other agencies are doing, but the equivalent of the food that we give out would feed 18,000 people a week. The food that does not go to those agencies, or food that comes in, we all know that raspberries are almost can't eat them when you leave the store. There's some foods that are just not going to hang on very long. That happens here as well. We go through those. We have a very basic composting program. We go through the food. We put what cannot be donated into Home Depot buckets with lids and store them in our cooler, in our walk-in cooler. And after we've gathered enough, typically 8 to 10 of those, we distribute them to urban farms in the area. And there are some farmers that will pick up food from us, but most of our excess inedible food waste is composted. You can feed your food to animals if your animals are not being raised to be sold to market. There's a Food Safety Modernization Act that was passed about 5 years ago that regulates what animals that are being grown to go to market can eat, and that cut out a lot of the food waste being able to be donated to farmers raising cattle and particularly pigs. Chickens will eat anything, so we have a lot of local chicken farmers that we're able to do that for, and often we get donated eggs in return for that food. I believe Potluck last year and the year before composted about 1 ton of food, so it's just about 2,000 pounds. And compared to the 400,000 pounds almost 400,000 pounds of food that we distributed, that's a pretty good ratio. Potluck is able to, we're very agile. I'll talk to you a little bit about our model so that you understand how it works. But we have, I have drivers that are driving a regularly scheduled route. They're picking up food from grocers and restaurants and then bringing it back here. And it turns around within 24 hours. So all food that comes in during the day, like food that came in during the day today, we don't repackage it, but we go through it to make sure that it's good to eat. And then It'll be sent out in the morning between 8 a.m. and noon, and then our coolers will be empty and we'll start the process over. So we have a turnaround time on all perishable goods that is 24 to 48 hours, unless it can be frozen. We have, breads, desserts, and things like that we will put in the freezer, just like I'm telling you guys to do at home. Don't let it go bad. Put it in the freezer and save it for another day. I've just about gotten to the end of what I had prepared to talk to you guys about. And I know there aren't very many of you, but if you have any questions, I'd be happy to take them. There's a chat box on the side, or you can ask questions. I don't know how you're going to do that, KK.
Yeah, you can just type your question in the chat. And I have a question based off of what you were saying. Can you tell us a little bit more about, is there like an environmental impact that these companies that might be selling like imperfect foods or ugly foods, is it the transportation issue, or what are some of the reasons why it might not be the most environmental friendly thing to do?
Well, I don't know that it's not environmentally friendly. I feel like a lot of those foods were going somewhere anyway. They were not just being donated. If the farmers can make money on them, I certainly want them to do that. But I feel like that those already, most of them already had an end place to go. A lot of those were being fed to animals. Those were not bad foods; they're just imperfect foods. So they could be. A lot of them are going into canning. A lot of the carrots and things that are ugly, they'll get chopped up and put into your Campbell's soup. There are. So I think a lot of that is marketing, and but I'm okay with it. It's not really doing any harm, I don't think. I do not work with Rubicon. That's a good question. I don't, and I've talked to some people at Rubicon. I've used them a little bit for gathering information, but I don't work directly with them in a partnership. Are there local nonprofits we partner with? I would say the answer to that is everybody we partner with is a local nonprofit. Almost, the majority of them are hunger relief agencies, and I would be happy to share a list of those with you. I can send our annual report that has a list of all the hunger relief agencies that we deal with. It also has a list of all of our corporate food donors, which is I like to sing their praises because it's kind of a big deal to get them on board to donate. But the non-hunger relief agency nonprofits that I work with, obviously CALS has reached out to us. We donate food for compost and probably chicken feed to Dunbar Garden. We also donate food for compost to the camp at Ferncliff. And then also they help us with our buckets. They donate buckets for our compost buckets that we collect the compost in. How do we publicize to get partners to distribute the food? Well, so far, truthfully, so that's a two-part question. Thanks, Patrice. I don't know if I understand the first part, and I might let you. How do we publicize to get partners who distribute the food? Well, we distribute the food. So I'm not sure I understand the question. If you want to type a clarifying sentence in there, and I'll answer the second part. What do we do when we get too much to turn around in 24 to 48 hours? That happens occasionally. Nothing worries me more than a Friday afternoon with a full cooler. But we have several agencies that are not on our regular pickup list, meaning they don't have a scheduled time to pick up food from us, and they are residential sites. Nehemiah House with the Union Rescue Mission, Dorcas House, our house with a shelter. We're typically able to call on our residential sites and get that food distributed to them. The other thing we do is in North Little Rock, we do not have a partnership in Little Rock, and we may work on that in the future because I think there's a gap there at this point. But in North Little Rock, we work with the Department of Housing and Urban Development, and we we will deliver, which we don't do often. We or for any of our agencies, they pick up here, but we will deliver excess produce, deli items, and prepared food to the low-income, high-rise housing in North Little Rock. And they will set it up like a grocery store in the lobbies downstairs and let the residents come and shop. And that's one of the things we do when we have too much food, because there's always someone that needs it, and we almost never want to throw any of that away. I will add, just for to be transparent, in the event, like for right now, I have some compost buckets that have meat in them, and I do not take that to our urban farmers because it's just, you can compost meat, it brings on all kinds of critters. When that happens, we use the 2 kinds composting. Here in North Little Rock, there is a composting facility that until last year was for yard waste only. It was just leaves and sticks that they would accept, and pallet wood. And then they opened it up to food waste, which is fantastic. It is a minimum of $40 a ton. And since we never have a ton to drop off, we just pay our $40. But when we have things like meat to compost, we'll take it out there, pay our $40, and leave it out there. Thank you, Julie. It is amazing. And that we are, I will say that we're 30 years old, and that blew me away when I came on here. The fact that this organization has been around for 30 years is incredibly forward thinking. How do we build on efforts like mine to do more regarding food waste reduction and diversion from the landfill? Education and programming. I mean, helping people to understand the impact of food waste, the impact that diverting food can have on hunger and the environment. And then asking people, making it a topic of conversation. Ask your favorite restaurateur, are you guys donating this? One big area that I believe we need a little bit more focus on is in event planning, particularly weddings, funerals, that sort of thing, and conferences. I do have a background in event planning, and I'm able to reach out to hotels. They are the least likely to donate food because they believe that there is a liability. And that is something I didn't bring up, but in food donation, a lot of your more corporate entities believe that they will be liable if someone were to eat their food and become ill. They will not be. It's just not a thing. There's a state law protecting them. A state Good Samaritan law. There is a federal law, the Bill Emerson Good Samaritan law, that protects people when they donate food. So there is no liability on food donation or any kind of donation for that matter when you're donating to charity. So really encouraging, if you are planning a wedding, or if you have a girlfriend that's planning a wedding or anything, call us and let us start, be a part of the planning process along with the people that are bringing the tables and getting the tablecloths. We show up at the end of an event and pick up all of the food. We provide steam pans so that it can be packed away. And I've got I have drivers that they just love me when I say, hey, you've got to be at this reception when it ends at 2 a.m. and pick all this food up. But we have events that we partner with as well. We pick up excess food from the marathon, Little Rock Marathon, and all their training events. We pick up all the excess food from the Cornbread Festival. We have picked up all of the excess food from Chili Fights in the Heights. So we really do seek out big events in the city, but it helps when it's not just coming from us. When attendees and customers and clients, they'll give you their ear before they'll give it to us. It always takes me a little bit more convincing. So that's where we could use your help. Any more questions?
This has been wonderful. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. I hope that everyone has learned a lot during this session, and it will be live on YouTube. So if you know somebody that might be interested in all of this, please share it or please share the YouTube recording with them so that we can help educate more people about this awesome resource that we have in our community. So thank you so much, Sylvia. And I did want to make one little plug for next week. We will have a taste of growing my plate with Katie Matthews, the Farm Corps member at Children's Library. So if you're able to attend, hop on at 6 o'clock and you'll get a tour of the garden, and then you will get to hear about some fun programming coming up in May. So I hope y'all can join us, and thank y'all so much for being here tonight. Bye.